Anti-life meets its end game. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is another declaration of truth from your host, Terry A. Hurlbut. Yesterday, the country saw the anti-life movement carry its sentiment to an absurd degree. The Capitol Police actually arrested 17 members of Congress and 18 other people in front of the Supreme Court. That the Capitol Police had to arrest those people just to clear First Avenue East for regular traffic was bad enough. But when Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York pretended to be in handcuffs, that was even less excusable. But I'm not going to talk at any length about her histrionics. Those are incidental. They'll tell you the whole anti-life ideology is morally bankrupt. We have an opportunity to embrace or re-embrace pro-life ideology, and we need not hide our light under any bushel baskets anymore. Before I begin, I do want to shout out to the sponsor of this channel, which is Conservative News and Views, link in the description. Be sure to check out the awesome CNAV Store. Scroll down near the bottom of that link, lots of good merchandise there, including this t-shirt that I have chosen once again to wear today. Note the legend, not your body, not your choice. That's what it's all about. How we celebrate new life beginning. Furthermore, we have the upper hand if we can consistently take it. Reportage of the anti-life protest on First Avenue East came from Al Jazeera, Newsweek, the New York Post, Business Insider, and the Washington Examiner, among others. The most salient official statement came from the Capitol Police on their Twitter account. At 3:35 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday, the Capitol Police put out a definitive tweet to which I have a link in the description. I quote, "We made a total of 35 arrests for crowding, obstructing, and incommoding. DC Code Section 22-1307. That arrest number includes 17 members of Congress," unquote, the Capitol Police. Now that section of the DC Code, to which I've left another link in the description, makes it unlawful to block car, foot, or other traffic along public streets, through public buildings, at entrances to the DC Metro, and so on. The code makes it a separate offense to keep doing it after law enforcement has told you to stop. It's a misdemeanor, and those who commit it can get up to 90 days in jail. The Capitol Police hauled Representative AOC away, not in handcuffs, but striking a pose. A Twitter influencer named Douglas K. Blair captured the whole thing. I've left a link in the description to that too. When you watch it, watch for when AOC abruptly breaks the pose and raises her right fist to signal defiance. Now, if you're going to do histrionics, you're more effective if you stay in character. Just saying. But I also have to say that nothing like this ever happened at any of the marches for life, as I know very well because I attended several of them over the years. Well, why did I just call this an anti-life protest? Because those people were there to protest the Supreme Court's handling of the case of Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. The court also summarily disposed of 3 similar cases through grant, vacate, and remand orders. I've left a link in the description to the Dobbs opinion and also to the final order list with 3 separate GVR orders relevant to that case, and they'll be right at the top. From the Daily Caller, I got a full list of representatives who provoked arrest for blocking traffic. Here they are: Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, Cori Bush of Missouri. Now, what do people in that state always say? Oh yes, you have to show me. Now, let's see, who else? Excuse me. The Carolyn Maloney, also of New York, Andy Levin of Michigan, the only stag in the group, Barbara Lee and Jackie Spire of California, Catherine Clark of Connecticut, Nadia Velasquez, also of New York, Jan Schakowsky of Illinois, Madeline Dean of Pennsylvania, Sarah Jacobs, back to California, Alma Adams of North Carolina, Bonnie Watson Coleman of New Jersey, and Verona Escobar from Texas. All Democrats. All Democrats and all female, except for that stag, Andy Levin. Now, as you can see, it includes every member of the squad except for its one stag member, Representative Jamal Bowman from New York. See, he wasn't there. It also includes some usual suspects, mostly from states where the Dobbs decision will likely have no effect. Now, the most notable exception is Texas, possibly North Carolina, Missouri, and Pennsylvania. Those last three results will likely depend on midterms. State Senator Doug Mastriano, for example, is a staunch pro-life and even civilizational Christian candidate. He's running for governor, and I heartily endorse him. Now, AOC's histrionics are undignified but incidental, not least because she's the only one to employ them. Yes, there's that word again. History what, I hear you asking. Well, it doesn't have anything to do with being historical or hysterical. The word histrionic comes from the ancient Greco-Latin word for an actor on the stage. AOC was play acting, hence the term. The basic anti-life position is far more important than that. Most of the representatives who block traffic and cause the Capitol Police to arrest them represent states where little to nothing is going to change. The Supreme Court allowed states to restrict, curtail, or forbid pregnancy-ending services if they so choose. Well, that isn't likely to happen in New York, California, Minnesota, Michigan, Massachusetts, ironic given the state's colonial history, Illinois, or New Jersey. Not at least after this midterms, and perhaps not for another 2 or 3 election cycles at least. The anti-life position and ethos are deeply entrenched in those states, and they never depended on Roe versus Wade. If anything, the Roe court imposed New York and California values on Texas, where Henry Wade was district attorney for Dallas County. So, why is this anti-life crowd so afraid? Why get upset because the Supreme Court, as Brett Kavanaugh said in his concurrence, decided that, in his words, the unelected members of this court will no longer impose New York or California values on all the states? Why indeed? Perhaps because they know that New York and California values are not sustainable. Now we get to the brass tacks about anti-life versus pro-life and why only pro-life values are sustainable and self-sustaining. Before I go on, I want to shout out to another sponsor, BitNext. This is your replacement for Zoom, Slack, the Google G Suite, Microsoft Office 365, Dropbox, WeTransfer, and Chili Piper, among others. Unlike any of them, BitNext protects your content and conversations so well that even the administrators can't see it. So this is your channel for secure comms, conferencing, cloud storage, and file sharing. Best of all, everything is back-end. You don't even need client software. If you have a browser, you can use BitNext. Follow the link at the very bottom, give them a try. 28 days free of charge. You can't beat that with a stick. All right, now, where were we? Oh yes, back to sustainable and unsustainable values. Now, as I said, only pro-life values are sustainable long-term. Political ideologies promote themselves in one of two ways. Parents pass their values along to their children, and university professors pass their values along to their students. For about 50 years, the University Professoriate kept the anti-life ethos alive. That ethos had a two-pronged attack. First, it represented a license to consider only the pleasures and desires of the moment. Second, it taught that Mother Earth groans with the birth of every child. The pro-life ethos had a much easier time. First, pro-life mothers kept their children. Anti-life mothers did not, at least not in nearly the same proportion. Second, the pro-life side has been building the parallel society of Stephen Turley, PhD, for decades. They built alternatives to secular colleges and universities to train their children as missionaries and clergy. In this, they emulated John Harvard, Elihu Yale, and the other founders of the original Ivy League. Not all these Bible colleges are still in business. Furthermore, some of these institutions have had to repent of certain less than biblical attitudes. Now, I'll give you an example, and I'm going to face it head on. Bob Jones University once had a regulation against mixed-race dating. They dropped it decades ago, and high time, too. That was the single best, most important reform they could have put into place. Whatever made them drop it, they had to drop it because the Bible would never support it. The Bible says there is not but one race, the human race. But the parallel society did have its colleges and universities for those who would actually materially benefit from a higher education. More important still, parental moral instruction beats professorial instruction so long as parents instruct consistently and lead by example. So the anti-life side had an inherent disadvantage. It did not have as many parents to inculcate its values into its children. For that matter, it had many fewer children than the pro-life side in absolute terms and in proportion to their numbers in society. Such was and is the very nature of the anti-life ethos. Now, with such a severe disadvantage, that side surely needed no others. But it did have other disadvantages. From the start, the anti-life side had to defend certain practices and practitioners that undermine the integrity and damage the dignity of the medical profession. I'm going to talk about 3 of them who, during the Roe era, each became the medical face of anti-life. We start with Kenneth Edelin, MD, from Boston University Medical College. He invented the first surgical procedure for ending a pregnancy, nor did he make any attempt to preserve life. Now, you may have heard of a very recent suggestion for surgically delivering a child very early and at least trying to preserve it. Well, Kenneth Edelin made no attempt to do that. I'm not going to go into what he did. You wouldn't thank me for it. Besides, nobody does it his way anymore. I haven't for decades. I will tell you that authorities in Boston tried him for the death of an infant during delivery and convicted him in 1974. They did this because it fell within William O. Douglas' 3rd trimester. That's a Roe term. But the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court vacated that conviction in 1976. Next, we turn to Leroy Carhart, MD. He invented another surgical technique for ending a pregnancy right before normal delivery. And again, I'm not going to go into what he did. But I'll tell you this, he came before the U.S. Supreme Court not once, but twice. First over a law the Nebraska legislature passed against him, and the second time over a federal statute forbidding the use of his technique. He won the first case, but lost the second. Indeed, his 2 cases showed the shifting composition of the court as would no other case until Dobbs. And I want you all to get one thing straight. For all the brouhaha you might have heard about his technique, which was abbreviated Papa Bravo Alpha, I never heard of any obstetrician gynecologist who cared to adopt his technique. I was still practicing my former profession at the time, and I recall overhearing 2 attending OB-GYNs discussing this. Trust me, neither one of them could think of any good reasons to employ the Carhart technique. And there was just something about it that they didn't want to touch with a proverbial 3-meter pole. Neither did Dr. Carhart get to do any grand rounds describing his technique, nor did I ever hear of his being booked on any Caribbean cruises to teach his technique in what they call continuing medical education. Bottom line, nobody uses the Carhart technique anymore, if they ever did. And nobody used it any more than they used the Edelin technique. But what did happen is that these two doctors became heroes to the anti-life side, though strictly among lay people only. But then the anti-life side gained a hanger-on whom they had to disown. Now, that was Kermit Gosnell, MD. Of his excesses, the less said, the better. Here, let's just say that he violated every rule in the book about aseptic technique. He used unlicensed staff, and some of the things he did even put the adult mothers at risk. Moreover, he was so callous, he was clueless. So the anti-life community could never have defended him as they did Drs. Edelin and Carhart. Like Edelin and Carhart before him, Gosnell would make sure not to preserve a young life. The problem was, he lost a mother under his care. Perhaps for that reason more than any other, he lost the support of the feminist community. Edelin and Carhart had the benefit of having the anti-life side celebrate them as heroes, even as their own profession never granted them any visiting professorships. But Gosnell, they threw under the bus. Even Wikipedia calls him a name you're going to find on a police blotter. Never mind what. Now, that happened nearly 9 years ago. After that, Donald J. Trump took time to replace the two last obstacles to the eventual Dobbs result. First was Anthony Kennedy. Second was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Then in 2018, the state of Mississippi passed the Gestational Age Act. That act set the time limit for ending a pregnancy at 15 weeks. No more Edelins, no more Carharts, and certainly no more Gosnells. Why did the Jackson Women's Health Organization fight this? You might as well ask why the anti-life side does, feels, and thinks as it does. If they had just left it alone, Chief Justice Roberts might have saved Roe, but they didn't. And they even presumed to give the court an ultimatum. Oh yeah, said Sam Alito. Well, we'll just see about that. Which is part of the reason the Jackson Women's Health Organization has ceased to operate. So, where do we stand today? Well, as I have said before, the anti-life side is being obnoxious and maybe desperate. The full House of Representatives passed a measure to codify Roe with all of 219 votes. Not only will the Senate never pass it, but after midterms, the House won't even get that many votes. Merrick Garland has shown why the Senate acted wisely in refusing to confirm him to the Supreme Court in 2016. He has threatened to sue any pharmacist who won't dispense mifepristone or other drugs for ending a pregnancy. But the real battle on the pro-life side must be for the hearts and minds of fellow citizens and members of the helping professions. Neither Edelin, nor Carhart, nor even Gosnell came out of a vacuum. All three men are products of the industrial instruction model for medical education that goes back to Abraham Flexner. They are also products of the anti-life ethos as it pervaded the medical profession and likely still does. Nor are they the only ones. They were just the most prominent. Fact, in my associate lab director days, I knew about a gynecologist who did his thing on an outpatient basis and routinely sent his stuff into our laboratory for disposal. I'm not going to tell you his name, or my old boss's name, or what hospital was involved. That practice ended decades ago when the powers that be found him more liability than asset. He wasn't even a tenth as bad as was Gosnell, but he was bad enough that the local medical establishment threw him under the bus. Eventually, it was not the New Jersey State Board of Medical Examiners who shut him down. It was the Department of Environmental Protection and Energy. I'll let you guess why. So once again, histrionics by certain politicians are incidental. Of far greater importance has been the overhyped and often self-serving actions of certain members of my former profession of medicine that provoke their colleagues to shy away from them more often than not. Now, We have to make sure that the medical profession will never again produce anti-life doctors. Hippocrates, of course, had his students swear an oath that he designed specifically to prevent this kind of thing. If Luke of Antioch did not improve on that oath, he certainly could have. I wrote an improvement on the Hippocratic Oath to his memory, and I've left a link in the description of that too. Today, if you go looking for a doctor, make it a doctor like Luke. Link in the description of the article, to the statement by the Capitol Police, to DC Code Section 22-1307, to the Douglas K. Blair video, to the Supreme Court's opinion in the Dobbs case, to its final order list, to biographies of Kenneth Edelin, Leroy Carhart, and Kermit Gosnell, to the Oath of St. Luke, and to conservative news and views. I have another link to the awesome online store and to BitNext, as I also mentioned. And if you like what you've heard, you can like this video. And on the end screen, I'll put in a subscribe link and also a link to my playlist on life issues, plus my earlier video about the Oath of St. Luke. This is Terry A. Hurlbut delivering another declaration of truth and reminding you that the truth set you free.